So what all laws share is that they're either acts of parliament or regulations that are promulgated by state and territory parliaments, which are then passed down to local government. And I did actually think at the start that most states and territories had blanket laws to protect trees, but most don't. And where they do exist, they rely heavily on local government to administer them. So a quick word on acts versus regulations for those who aren't familiar with how the legal system works, and I certainly didn't before I got into Parliament. But acts are what are called the superior piece of legislation. They've got to go through both houses of Parliament, so they need to have the political support to get through the upper house and the lower house. To get through the lower house, they just need to have the support of the government of the day, and they can be amended. So every clause in an Act of Parliament can be amended when that Act goes through Parliament or when an amending Act goes through the Parliament. Regulations, or regs as we call them, are subordinate legislation, so you can't have a regulation unless there's an Act that it refers to. We also have local government law-making powers, which are either through the relevant Local Government Act or the planning laws which enable local councils to create what we'd call planning instruments, and there's quite a number of states that rely on their planning instruments. The common themes in tree laws across Australia, regardless of whether they're state or territory or local government, are that declared pest species are generally excluded from protection, pruning of trees is permitted if it's for maintenance purposes or considered in the best interest of the tree, and criteria to determine which trees should be protected vary enormously. Many councils actually have significant tree registers to which members of the public may make nominations, and that's really where their similarities end. So if we go to the most comprehensive law in Australia, it's the ACT's Tree Protection Act, and the ACT, bearing in mind, isn't just a territory government, it's actually a local council as well, so it's a hybrid, and its act is some 100 pages worth. And it states in its objects that it exists to protect both individual trees and the urban forest, which I thought was interesting, as well as to promote community appreciation of trees. And I don't think that sort of sentiment exists in any other state piece of legislation. It's in some of the local government laws. And the Act recognises what it calls registered trees, which are placed on the register because they have individual importance, or regulated trees which fit into a blanket set of criteria, which you can see on the screen, that being 12 or more metres high, trunk circumference of 1.5 metres or more, have 2 or more trunks and the sum of their individual circumferences above ground is 1.5 metres, or have a canopy of 12 metres or more wide.
There's a set of regulations. How important is it to consider enforcement with those regulations?
The obvious answer is very important that they're enforced. People have to know that if they're not going to do the right thing, that they are going to get penalised for them.